Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here at allpointstv.com. And we are coming to you both at this studio, and also we'll be up and running on the network WFOV, and that's 92.1 radio station that we air on Saturdays as we do the program there at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. And we're glad to have both audiences with us as always, and we definitely appreciate your time. We know you could be doing other things with your time.
Yeah, you're kind of like the sole, locally produced, more conservative libertarian voice out there.
Yeah.
You see, you got like you feel like a three-area niche, like the black man who is a conservative libertarian in the city of Flint. So basically, it's like, it's like if you want something, if you want true diversity, listen to Mr. Moss.
And also when you say black conservative, you should say unapologetic. Black conservative, because those persons waiting for me to apologize for my politics, waiting a long time. I want to try to find out why they, in fact, think that they should be embracing the party of the Ku Klux Klan.
My own grandfather, my mom's dad, his family was from another country. They got harassed by the KKK right here in this city, when they first came here. But he was a Democrat. And I remember I never got a chance to ask him, and he and I tied into it several times because he was a socialist Democrat. But I'd like to ask him, well, why are you embracing the party? The people who belong to that party are the ones who just burned a cross on your lawn. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. But I guess you got your reasons. But
Yeah, I have no apology to make to anybody, and it's amazing to me that people that are glued into a party that lynched their grandfathers and their grandmothers think they have something to teach me about my politics, and it doesn't work that way. I don't take any instructions, and there's nobody in this town, quite frankly, that's qualified to instruct me. I hate to say that, but that's true.
Now, you got first-time listeners probably to the radio, so you might have a first-time listener. Go back. I mean, you came from the historically black colleges, traditionally black colleges in the South.
Yeah, I came from Knoxville College, a great institution. But I think that the grounding point of my education was in the all-black high school, Parker High School, and before that Patterson School, elementary school, from grades 1 to 8. I had nothing but black teachers because I was raised in the segregated South. But I didn't see it as a segregated institution I was in. I looked at it as being a black institution, and that the schools I passed by on my way to what was Parker High School, I looked at that as I was passing by a white institution and going to a black institution. And when I got there to Parker High School, I saw order. I had teachers that had a lot of caring, and they thought at that time what they were doing was bringing forth the future. So they were really dedicated to what they were doing. And we didn't have any wiggle room for going in there and playing these games in these classrooms like I see going on right now. We were in there trying to get the skills we needed to make sure that whatever they were blocking blacks from doing would not work, because our preparation, our superior preparation in those schools would not have allowed for anyone to put roadblocks in our place.
See, I had a teacher when I was in high school, elementary school. She was a lot like a similar background to you. She came from the South, historically black colleges. Mrs. McRae, her son was like a civic leader or something here for a while there back in the 70s, and she was demanding. One time she kept me, because I wasn't doing my work. I admit I was not doing my work. She kept me after school 3 hours. No, keep in mind, school day lasts 6 hours. I mean, I'm going to almost half the school, like another half a day of school. I hated her right then, for that. But I mean, she was demanding. I was a white student. So, I mean, she wanted me to get this stuff. It wasn't punitive. She wasn't being punitive. She didn't want me to be left behind. And I mean, to this day, I have nothing but respect for her. And she, like I said, she was very demanding. But she also could give quotes from like Greeks and stuff like that, and she had a little bit of philosophy going with her and stuff. So she was well educated. I mean, and that I give them that. I mean, if that was the example of the product they produced from those schools, and you included, they did an extraordinary good job, I think. So
they were really great educators that were dedicated to the profession. And they saw themselves as standing in the gap between the lack of opportunity in some ways in the Southern culture, which is run by the Democratic Party, by the way. And I contend this too, and I think a lot of persons would agree with me if they think about it, is that the civil rights movement that was headed by Dr. King, and I put Dr. King in that from 1955 until 1968, the year of his death. I think that in that 13-year period of time between the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama, and the assassination of Dr. King in Memphis, Tennessee, I think in that 13-year period of time, the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, has to be reconfigured as a movement against the Democratic Party in the South. And so when people think they're going to instruct me about my conservatism, I have some news for them, that they're not qualified to be stuck in a party that was one that was standing in the way of black advancements all over the South. Whatever state you went into, they were standing in the way. And Dr. King's movement, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, was designed to move them out of the way. And so those that don't know history are doomed to repeat its mistakes, but I know history.
But I know that
I'm not repeating that mistake.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. This is because I'm not a student of the civil rights era. I mean, I've known a little bit about it because I grew up on the very end of that. You know, I mean, I got a bit more aware of things. But they say the reason why there was a shift is that when Martin Luther King was in jail, somebody got in contact with Bobby Kennedy, and he responded. So that caused this transition, this disappearance. And the Kennedys were, for the most part, were not the part of the Democratic old boy establishment. They their father, they're from Massachusetts. They were from a very corrupt political machine, but they did some good too. I mean, as much as I give credit where credit's due. I see the facts. I can't deny the facts. I'm not a leftist. Yeah. But I mean, so is that what you say was a transition took place then, or what?
That part of the history is very interesting that you're raising. Dr. King was in jail in Reedsville, Georgia. And both camps, Richard Nixon was running against John F. Kennedy in 1960, and both camps were vying for prominence in what were they going to do about the fact that Dr. King was in jail, because both of them were trying to woo the black vote. And that's something we have to look at in terms of the other aspect of these political machinations that are taking place, and that is how you position your vote to have maximum impact. You certainly do not park the vote in one political party to the exclusion of the other party, and let the party that you've excluded from your cognizance of maybe going and voting for a candidate in that party, you first of all do not want them to close off any appeal to you for your vote, and then the party that you have parked your vote to support, you don't want that party to take your vote for granted. This is just common sense politics. But that's not what we see going on, and those persons that are critical of those that have understood the political process a little bit more and have positioned themselves to be more independent of either of the two parties have the upper hand in that conversation every day of the week. But in terms of 1960, Dr. King was in jail in Georgia, and both political parties vying for the black vote that wasn't stuck at that time in one party to the exclusion of the other party. Both parties are trying to appeal to the black vote. And in those two camps, Nixon's camp and John F. Kennedy's camp, they are saying, what should we do about King being in jail? And they're both trying to figure out a way in which they could approach this and maximize the political potency of their involvement. And so what happened was that the Kennedy camp came up with a strategy before Nixon's camp. It's all politics, you see, John. What Kennedy decided to do, because he had these advisors in his on his team, and Adam Clayton Powell was one of them. And they had another guy in there who they put over there. They put him over there from Chicago, and they had him in a little cubby hole. They called it Uncle Tom's Cabin in Kennedy's camp. But they came with a strategy, and the strategy was that they would call Coretta Scott King and assure her that they were going to look into her husband's incarceration in Georgia. Now, don't forget, King was from Atlanta, Georgia. And if you're arrested in the South, there was a little bit of Klan activity now in the police force. So when you get arrested, there was always a lot of concern about the well-being of the person, and are they going to mistreat them while they're in jail? All those were concerns because blacks were pretty much debilitated because they couldn't vote in the South. And so they had no political appeal to anybody that was in power, because if you can't vote for them, you cannot secure anything on your own behalf, because the vote has been restricted, in fact, the voting is what they're fighting over in the South. And this it was a problem that King was trying to address. Now, King was in jail in 1960, and John F. Kennedy calls Coretta Scott King. Of course, he alerts the press that he's called her, so the press is now putting this out, that John F. Kennedy makes a phone call to Coretta Scott King, and he assures her they're going to look into the husband's incarceration in Reidsville, Georgia, and that makes the news. And Dr. King's father, Reverend Martin Luther King Sr. Now, don't forget, both of them had the name Michael King until it was changed later on. And when Martin Luther King changed his name to Martin Luther rather than Michael King, the dad had changed his name to Martin Luther, named after the great reformer in Germany in 1517, who attacked those 96 theses on the Catholic Church in Wittenberg, Germany, complaining about how the Catholic Church was carrying out its Christian duty to the poor, and was saying they had 1,100 rooms in the Vatican, and the poor out there nowhere to stay, no shelter, and they were not allowed to use the Vatican as a place of respite, and was making those kinds of critiques of the Catholic Church, and then started the Protestant movement. Well, Dr. King is also a reformer, and so therefore, at a young age, around age 6 or 7, they've changed Dr. King's name from Michael to Martin Luther, and now this boy is being raised up with the idea that he's there to do something great, which you would not have known that until he had some time to show what his inclinations were, and they saw a tendency in this young man, and they raised him in that point of view. So I'm not surprised that later on, at the age of 26, Dr. King is leading the civil rights movement because of his upbringing. But being in jail in 1960, as it were, Kennedy runs a coup on the Nixon campaign, and he gets a scoop by calling before the Nixon administration was able to act. And when that happened, Dr. King's father said he's going to bail up a fistful of votes, put them in a suitcase, and haul them over there to the Democratic Party and put those votes in behalf of the Kennedy campaign. And 80% of blacks in 1960 threw their weight behind the Democratic Party candidate, and that made the difference in that campaign. And John F. Kennedy, rather than Richard Nixon, won the presidency by the skin of his teeth. There's a lot of different angles to that, by the way. And one angle of it would be the speech made by the other voice out there on the other side of the political divide, and that voice was that of El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, later on earlier than that, Malcolm X. And Malcolm X, in his most famous speech called Message to the Grassroots, which was a speech that was given on, let's see, November the 10th, make sure I'm right here, it's either October the 10th or November the 10th, 1963, and he spoke down at the Solomon Baptist Church located on 7 Mile Road, and the speech was called Message to the Grassroots. And when Dr. King gave his March on Washington in August of that year, Dr. King's speech and also the election of 1960 was in fact analyzed in that speech by Malcolm X. And Malcolm X would say that black people threw 80% of their vote behind the Democratic Party, and he said the party that blacks bagged couldn't keep the promise that they made to them during election time. He told blacks that and blacks continue to go around here to identify themselves with that party. He said because they were chumps. That's what Malcolm said. I'm not. I would say the same thing, but that's not what I said. Don't blame it on Desinex. I didn't say that, but it's still true. And he said that a couple of times. He said he kept saying because you're chumps. Then he said anytime you throw your weight behind the Democratic Party and that party can't keep the promises they made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to continue to identify yourself with that party, he said you're not only a chump, you're a traitor to your race. I only say that to let you see who you're messing with, because you don't know. I mean, I get offended by people who have not read a single book trying to tell me something about the history. And I taught this for 40 years. You don't have anything to teach me. And that doesn't just go for the ones in this town. That goes for out in this country. You don't have anything to teach me. You may think that you do. You know, it's amazing to me that people, when I was on Facebook, and John was telling me before we started the program today, John was telling me that a person had tried to get in touch with me from WFOV, and he had tried to get in touch with me through Facebook. He said I had not responded, so he called the studio before I arrived here today, and I think he probably wants me to do something on WFOV Wednesday of this week, which I'd be very glad to do, because I have a lot of respect for WFOV and its listeners, and that is a great station that Mr. Paul Herring has set up over there, and I listen to their programs all the time. I have pretty much, really turned off mainstream media. I do my media through the internet, YouTube, and those things. I very seldom have my television set on, because I understand the bias that you have in that which is licensed to be aired by the FCC, and you don't go on there on those stations unless they are aware that they have to understand the controls you're under with the Federal Communication Commission, because there are certain things you have to do to maintain your license. And it didn't just start with Donald Trump. This has been going on ever since the FCC has been set up. But I'm just saying here that now I'm off Facebook, because Facebook took my voice away from me on the 19th of October based upon a publication that I put on that post. I was going to do a 3-part series, and after I did part 1, they didn't want to see part 2 and part 3. So the excuse they used was, after I did part 1, we don't think that you did that, so we need you to send a picture to us to verify that your account has not been hacked. And so I sent them a picture, and that wasn't good enough. We let you know, we are still checking into it. So they couldn't tell that was me, because I sent them a different picture than the one that was on Facebook. So what I did, I had somebody take a picture of me wearing the same hat that I was wearing on my Facebook post, so they would have no doubt, but that was me. My post has not been hacked. I said it. I stand up for it. I ain't backing down from it. And you can take that for what it's worth, or you can let it alone. Shut up. And they just were not going to be back on Facebook. And so after about a month, I kept going back and forth. I kept sending one picture after another, but I knew the game they were running, and they just and Twitter had just silenced the president for 11 minutes. They took him off the air because they didn't like what he was saying in his Twitter.
Can you imagine them doing that to any other president?
Couldn't have done it.
I mean, well, besides the Twitter didn't exist, okay, but I can't. That is a form of media. I couldn't imagine years ago they would clamor to get the president to use them as a resource.
Right
now, it's like this got this utter contempt. I mean, I knew people couldn't stand Barack Obama, but I didn't see them go through the great lengths to try to defend him. They didn't.
John, he's an outsider. And they take liberties because they understand, here's what they understand. They understand that neither the Democrats nor the Republicans would back this president, and they have more license now with Donald Trump as an outsider than we have with anyone in the Beltway. Not that either of these two parties, I want a person to understand me very well here, not that either of these two parties is worth 2 cents. That's a penny apiece. Well, in fact, that's with inflation. I mean, give me a break. These people are not representing anybody, and I don't have respect for either party. I'm a conservative, because I want to conserve what we had, and I don't want to, in fact, keep giving away that which was the bridge that brought us over from those trials and tribulations of the past and brought us to this day now. It's only the road we trod, and now we've forgotten the bridge that brought us over from that point to this point that we're in right now, where we're throwing it all away under this liberalism. And that's what I wrote about, by the way, on October the 19th. I was writing about how racism is not black people's number one bugaboo and impediment in this country. Their number one problem is their liberalism. And when they adopted liberalism, you can see a ratio going with the black community going downward and the amount of liberalism in the community going upwards. The inverse relationship between those two has caused this chaos in our community. And we didn't have that in the past. When black people were more conservative and were carrying out a conservative agenda, the black community was a much more sane place than it is right now. And I think people should need to read these books now, and just don't take my word for anything, but go read the books. Go check the information out. One of which is really written by this great, I think, just a great person. He's out there representing. Of course, nobody likes what he's saying, but he's representing. And that person is Burgess Owens. Burgess Owens got a very important book called Liberalism, or How to Turn Good Men into Whiners, W-H-I-N-E-R-S, Whiners, Weenies, W-E-E-N-I-E-S, and Wimps, W-I-M-P-S. Liberalism, How to Turn Good Men into Whiners, who are just whining all the time. Some of the whining going out here with these football players out there making $2.44 million, and they're out there taking a knee, and which they can do that because they made it in the NFL, and nobody's going to fire them because of the superior skills they've already been able to demonstrate. So they own the team and they have financial security. But what about those children they influence in those elementary schools, who are coming through the network that they've already gone through and now being turned away from effort in that place where they are in those schools, taking a knee and disavowing their interest in going forward in this country? They're doing a disservice to the black community because they're all liberals. This is liberalism that you're looking at out there on the football field, and I categorically reject it and stand against it, as would Burgess Owens, because the man is right. How to turn good men into whiners, weenies, and wimps. And now we got 80%. Really, it was 80% when Malcolm was talking about it in 1963. It's now 90% of blacks voting proactively, no matter who the candidate is, voting for the Democratic Party. And that's a problem. If even the party were... If this party was one in which they were carrying out some political responsibility to the black community, that still would be problematical, because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. Somebody got to feel different about things. I mean, where do you have, I would ask this question also, what do you have in the black community where 90% of blacks agree on anything except the Democratic Party? Somebody come call somebody call in and tell me, what else do you find black people 90% in agreement about anything other than voting for the party of the Ku Klux Klan? John, how did that happen?
I'm puzzled. I was puzzled by my own grandfather back in the party. I'm like, these guys are the ones that burnt crosses on your... Okay. Well, you're not supposed to question your elders, but I just saw that was kind of lame.
Another thing is that the idea is that all of the Klansmen, or those that were standing in front of the public as if they were not part of the Klan, like George Wallace, like Ross Barnett, like Orville Faubus, in Arkansas. Ross Barnett was in Mississippi. George Wallace, we all know him, in Alabama, standing in a schoolhouse door and blocking Vivian Malone and what's Robert's last name, from entering the University of Alabama, and saying segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever. I mean, that's what they were doing down there, and they weren't doing it because they were necessarily bad people. These were politicians doing that. And if you can't vote, and they quieted your vote despite the 14th Amendment, you know, the amendment that was passed in 1870 that gave that it didn't guarantee the right to vote, but it said that you could not deny the right to vote based upon race, color, national origin, or previous condition of servitude. And that's what they were doing in the South then, was violating that amendment to do that. We're going to take a pause with WFOV. And the listeners there, you'll come back in 4 minutes from that great station over there, and we will catch you up where we are at the point when you come back in 4 minutes. And we're looking forward to you coming back to the network. We're going to continue, though, our discussion here, and we don't take a break from what we do here at allpointstv.com, because we did. John will be in here with the whip and beat us back to the microphone. So there's no break here. There are no breaks here at the station. We go right through with the 1 hour format that we have here in our program. But I do want a person to understand something here, and that is that there's no taking of any prisoners here. I'm always on offense. I never go on defense. And when persons make these accusations as if you don't have a right to your own voice, as if they found the answer and there should only be that voice out there, and they found the answer now in terms of what we ought to be doing, because they got it going on, and who else got it going on? Only them. Nobody else supposed to do any thinking here, and they're supposed to do all the thinking on the left. The left is doing us in. And if they think that's not true, go and look at the Democratic Party and find out that where the Democratic Party is strongest is where the black community is concentrated, where blacks are concentrated in the community. That's where the Democratic Party is strongest, because it has a monopoly on the vote of blacks. They're going to vote Democrat regardless. And there's a tremendous amount of confusion in acting that way politically, because no party can be 100% right all the time and be operating anybody's interest 100% of the time, because there got to be some break in it. Somebody will be out there not representing. And the Democratic Party, quite frankly, has a black community surrounded. You go look in any community where black people are today, and I don't care what city it is, Chicago, go look over in Chicago, which has a killing field over there. And what is the Democratic Party's relationship to the black community? They have it surrounded. You go look in Baltimore, another killing zone, or come to Detroit. I don't want to make you believe that I'm not going to say the same thing about where I live in Flint. Same way here. It's not any different here. They have the Democrats have the black community surrounded in Flint. That's all you have in power. And I'll say, and I don't bite my tongue. I don't try to solicit anybody's approval of what I say and what I stand for. I don't need anybody's goodwill or them to sanction anything. In fact, I have to respect people before I would cater. I wouldn't even if I respect them, I wouldn't cater to anything. I'm going to say what I have to say based upon the evidence. And there was no victory necessarily they had when they went to the polls and voted the governor. I mean, not the governor, the mayor back into office. Not that I would be against her being in office, but I'm saying that the only ones that won in that proposition was those that were elected back into those offices. The people didn't win. The politicians won. Because the people don't win when you vote the politicians in. The politicians win. And anyone that thinks that they won anything, what did they win? There's not any more jobs that came into the city than would have come if the mayor had lost. I mean, that's not how you win. You win by putting things in place. You win by having the children going to school, open their books up and getting their work out, so that they can do better when they get their future going. And we're back with WFOV, and we're very glad to have you come back. Whenever you leave and and you are gone away for 4 minutes. We have to worry about you, but you always seem to come back, and we are very glad that you do that. And we're trying to do our best here at allpointstv.com to merit your approval and your time. We respect both, but we don't respect these politicians who are, in our way. And that's the way it's going to be. Let me tell you what I came here to talk about the studio primarily, though. I mean, we could talk about the civil rights movement, and and put it into the right perspective in terms of what it was trying to do, because we don't have an understanding of the civil rights movement. We got this idea that Dr. King was out there trying to correct the whole country. He's trying to address racism in America, and if that were true, then we need to go back. If Pearsons believe that, we need to go back to Dr. King's March on Washington. The one that you knew about is the one in 1963, August 28, 1963. But that's not the first time King went to Washington in a March on Washington. Dr. King went to Washington in a March on Washington on May the 17th, 1957, and he went there on that date to commemorate the 3rd anniversary of the Brown versus Board of Education decision that had been rendered by the Supreme Court in the court case called Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. And 3 years into that, King went to Washington, and his speech was entitled, "Give Us the Ballot." And was he talking about that in terms of the ballot in New York, the ballot in Chicago, the ballot in Detroit, the ballot in Flint? No, the blacks were voting in those places. King was talking about give us the ballot in the South, where the voice had been muted. And because the voice had been muted, then the Klan is riding all over the place at the beck and call of the politicians who were riding in the black community for what purpose? To scare black people away from going to the polls and voting. This is politics. This idea, and this is where we got confused. This idea that the country is reaping of racism and things of that sort. Look, the racism of the country is the racism of the two political parties, basically the Democratic Party. And they've been able to throw this stone, this proverbial stone, and hide their hands. And there's no scholar, none of you in this city and none of you around the country are going to come in my space and argue otherwise, or you're going to get your feelings hurt. That's what's going to happen there. John, they're not going to come in here and start that noise. They can holler from afar, but when it comes down to the documentation, then bring your evidence, and I'll bring my evidence. You bring your documents, and I'll bring my documents, and we'll see which one of us is right.
I would say that most of the left basically depends on emotions and getting what people feel, rather than something that's intelligent, something that's rational based. I mean, it's like they stir up emotions, and that's good. You got to have emotions. You got to have some emotion. You can't divorce that.
I like emotions as long as it's about passion. I like emotions that take the place of reasoning, but as long as it's a passion that you have, and your passion is based upon some documented source, that's a good thing. You need to have passion for a position. But what I find is a lot of passion without any information, and the passion taking the place of information. In other words, name calling, that's passion. But name calling is not an argument. And I find a lot of that going on when persons want to come out and start calling persons out their names. And what really is interesting that people that are the Uncle Remuses, you know how they get into these names, Uncle Remus, Uncle Tom, Aunt Jemima. The person that's doing the name calling of those, that's projection. That's projection, by the way. People are projecting out their own, failed understandings off on others, and they're going to do this caricaturing of others, which really belongs. They need a mirror. They need a mirror, because they need to parrot their accusations back toward themselves. All of them are basically sellouts. And if they're on the left, I can tell you right now, if they're on the left, they're exactly what Burgess Owens wrote about, and they are whiners, weenies, and wimps. The ones that are standing in the gap right now and moving things forward in the black community, it's not those guys out there kneeling on Sundays at these football games. They're not bringing anything forward. These guys, these persons are in black people's way. And there are some that know that and are afraid to say it, and there are some that don't know and think these guys are fighting a civil rights battle on their behalf. But I'm aware of it, and I'm going to say it. The only thing I care about is the truth, and I don't care who doesn't like me saying what I say. That's Facebook. You can take me off the network. You have not broken my spirit. I'm still out here, and I'll find another network to convey what I have to say, because I have some things to say away from the mainstream, and the mainstream does not control my voice. Nobody controls my voice. George Moss controls my voice, and I don't have anybody going to tell me what to say. I don't have any masters. Well, I do have some masters, but that's my degrees. That nobody can take that away from me. My mom told me a long time ago, boy, go and learn something, because that's the one thing they can't take away from you. And they can't take away my dignity too, because I heard that in a song. Now let me say a few things about what I really wanted to say here, because I want to talk about what I saw right before I came to the studio. I was listening to two things. One was Al Franken. Al Franken, the senator from Minnesota. And the other one was, by the way, I was listening to Prince Harry. Prince Harry is getting ready to marry Meghan Markle, the actress. And, she's biracial. And so it's kind of like a lot of information about the arrangement, because it's so unusual. But, not so unusual when you understand the history of England, as most persons may think it is, because England has a very interesting history that's behind closed doors. You go and look at George III. George III was married to Charlotte, Sophia Charlotte, from the family of Hanover, that comes out of the area of Germany, and she was the consort. They say consort. She was the wife of King George III, and she was 1/8. They call her she was an octoroon in history, meaning that she carried 1/8 of the bloodline of the Moorish group that had gone into Europe in 711, and that family had gone all the way up and tried to go into the other parts of Europe. Some of them got through there, not the whole group. Some of them were stopped at the Battle of Tours in 732 under Charles Martel, called Charles the Hammer, and they stopped most of the Moorish incursion into Europe in the Pyrenees Mountain, which is the mountain between Spain and France. And so Charles the Hammer met them there, and the hammer knocked them back down into the Iberian Peninsula. But some of them got through there, and those Moorish, that Moorish influence was some of the influence that went all the way up into Europe, to even into England and into other parts of Europe. Well, Charlotte was Charlotte, after whom Charlottesville is named. Charlotte, North Carolina is named after her. That the woman, the wife of George III, there's that strain in the British population from that marriage between those two. And one of the offsprings of that marriage was Edward VI. And Edward VI was the father of Queen Victoria. So you see that line is so everybody's looking at Meghan Markle as something that is very different, a strain of something that's never happened before in England, but that's not really true if you understand the history of that. But that's anyway. It was very interesting to watch that interview on television, and and it was really just a wonderful thing to look at how they are just so, and you could tell they have so much respect for each other and so much love for each other. When Meghan Markle was talking, she was talking to the media, but she couldn't keep her eyes off of Prince Harry. And she would look over there. She couldn't help but start smiling. There was so much chemistry between the two of them, and that's good to see people coming from different cultural backgrounds and seeing this kind at the highest level. She's an actress, and he is a prince in waiting. I won't say was waiting for, but in order for you to become the person that's going to take the place of if you're a prince, you are a king in waiting. So you're basically waiting for the person that is up there to abdicate or to leave permanently. But that was just so great to see it, and I was just really marveling over the chemistry between the two of them. That was a good news and a good press conference. Now the other conference was this one by Al Franken. Now Al Franken was calling for the non-candidacy of Roy Moore in my home state of Alabama, the great state of Alabama, without George Wallace and without the others, because the South is a great place and was a great place despite its politicians. I have to see the forest and the trees. And although I was in the segregated South, I knew it was primarily because of the Bull Connors and the George Wallaces and the Sheriff Clarks and all that rigmarole that they had going on for political purposes. I was able to separate that from what I was seeing in growing up around other parts of the white community during that time. And I saw too much goodwill otherwise away from the politicians that let me know this was a political thing that was going on. And you'd be surprised how many persons have not been able to distinguish between the two, discern between the politicians and what they were doing and what the masses of the people were in fact doing. I had too many interactions in the South to fall for this was anything other than something pushed by the politicians. And if people are going to be racist and all that, you don't need laws to enforce it. You don't have to have the politicians passing laws saying that blacks ride in the back of the bus and whites ride in the front of the bus. They would do that. Whites would do it on their own to push you in the back of the bus. But they had laws that required that. And to sit elsewhere would have been a violation of the law passed by the politicians. And they were advantaging one group that could vote and disadvantaging another group that could not vote, and that's politics. King was saying, give us a ballot to end that. And people do not see that that's what the civil rights movement was really about. It was a civil rights movement organized against Democrats, the solid South, the Democratic Party. You can call them Dixiecrats if you want to. But what Malcolm said is a Dixiecrat is nothing but a Democrat in disguise. And he's right about that. And so, but it's not that I'm pushing for the Republican Party. Neither party is worth anything. And people be waiting till the cows come home for these parties to do what they're supposed to be doing by the American people. I brought a book to the studio because I want to talk about Al Franken and the rest of them, John Conyers. John Conyers and that gang up there. And they're not the only ones, just the ones that got caught. And I was listening to this conference, it was held a few minutes ago by Al Franken, which he would title it, I'm Sorry, which I would title that conference is, I Ain't Resigning. But that's what Al Franken was saying. I don't care what you caught me doing, I am not quitting. I'm too addicted to power, and I'm not stepping down. Yet this joker was calling for the non-candidacy of Roy Moore in Alabama because Roy Moore has been accused of having been trying to date, maybe even taken out teenagers when he's like 30 some odd years old, and these were 14 and 16-year-old girls who waited 40 years to tell their story, and now out here, these stories we can't verify. Roy Moore is supposed to stand down, and here's Al Franken calling for him to stand down, and now today he got a press conference going on with his hypocritical self, saying in essence, and this is what he really was saying, is I'm sorry I got caught, but now that I've got caught, I apologize, and I continue. I'm going forward, and I ain't quitting. That's what was in that press conference. But I brought a book to the studio today, and this book was written in 1972. It's called Who Runs Congress? The date of the book, 1972. So I don't want you to think that you're seeing something that just was a happenstance that began to occur last week, or with Al Franken, with his crooked self. There's a chapter in the book, Who Runs Congress, and now let me pose a question here to you. Here are the choices. You tell me which one you think runs Congress. It has, who runs Congress, the question it raised here, who runs Congress? The president, big business, or you? Okay, that's a question. That's a multiple choice question. A, B, and C. The president, A, B, big business, C, the American people. You got 2 seconds to answer. What's your answer? And in place of big business, I would take that out. And I would say the president, the money interests, or you. Because big business don't run anything. The money runs it. Washington is a money laundering operation. And you can read the book written by Thomas DeLorenzo. It's one of the best books that DeLorenzo has written, although I've read a number of his books, and they're all very classic works. There's some very good stuff that he's put out. One of his great books is the one called Organized Crime. That's at the top of the book, and then down below it, at the bottom, because you think organized crime, you think automatically about the mafia, right? So he says organized crime, but the bottom of the book, the subtitle is The Unvarnished Truth About Government. And he's saying organized crime is Washington, D.C. If that's true, then that means that Congress and the rest of it up there in Washington, including all that stuff we now call the hidden, we call it the deep state, but really talking about and some call it the shadow governments, but we're talking about, when you say the deep state or the hidden government, we're saying the government in back of the government. The problem that people have in understanding there's a government in back of the government is that they do not understand there's a government that is in back of itself. Or you can say the shadow government, right? Because a shadow can exist unless it's a reflection of something that's visible. So the shadow government is the government behind the government. And why is there a government behind the government? Because that government that's in front of you does not want to be held to account. And that's why Al Franken was out there today. I'm so sorry, and I will do better. I'm going to try not to do this again, and I blah, blah, blah. And what he was really saying is I ain't quitting. You caught me, and I'm sorry for getting caught, but I'm not resigning. And I'm gonna be watching that race in particular, that when he comes up for re-election, to see what the people do, because we need to take those persons out of power. And the American people have the power to do that, but they're so constrained by the party line. They vote based upon party. These persons get away with murder. And John Conyers is no different.
I think it's harder for a person to switch political allegiance, especially in this area where the Democratic Party has been such a control over people for 65 years. They would actually have more of a difficult changing parties than they would religions.
Yeah, I think so, John. Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it, that people have that kind of allegiance, because politics is really another religion, as a matter of fact, in terms of people's belief system. They believe in the party. I would like for either one of the parties to tell us what they stand for. I don't think either party stands for any principles. I mean, the Republican Party, what does the Republican Party stand for today? And I'll tell you what they stand for, but just raising the question. And what does the Democratic Party stand for today? I'll tell you what they stand for. They stand for getting reelected.
Perpetuate their power base.
And their power base. They want to maintain power. Beyond that, there are no principles. Either one of the parties, neither one of them have any virtue. And in this book called Who Runs Congress, this was written in 1972. And let me read some things out of this book here to let you see this didn't just start recently. There's a chapter called Love and Marriage. Washington, I'm reading from the book here now. Washington, Mrs. Oliver Wendell Holmes once told Teddy Roosevelt, is, quote, a place full of famous men and the women they married when they were young. One result, especially recently, has been the breakups of politicians' marriages. Nearly all congressmen arrive married. Everyone else, however, has first claim on those politicians. Now, let me give an example of that in the book. That's a little bit further down in that same paragraph. When Mrs. Abbott Quee called her husband to say that her baby was about to arrive, Quee replied, quote, well, I've got to make a speech against Secretary Freeman first. So what does that mean? It means that, yeah, we're getting ready to have a baby, but hey, I got to make a speech here. And that's important. That takes precedent. She says, the author says, another burden on marriage is the sexual temptations public office holders face. Using power as a love potion, mixing with the glamorous, sometimes the congressmen put aside marital loyalties as carelessly as they shed other duties. There's not much discussion of this in print, since it is unfair to single out a congressman or congressman as a group for something not unique to Washington. In other words, not very much in print about this, because there's not anything that is that's anything different than they would act in the other capacity. Okay, I understand that. You don't bring it out into the open so much because it's not anything unusual, but we need to understand it in the sense that we have persons looked at as public servants, and that's what we think we've elected here, when we are electing people that have the same foibles as anyone else has.
I don't know about you, but if you look at the money these people walk away with after they decide to leave office or don't get reelected, they sure as hell make a lot more money than I would pay my servants. Yes. And they got more sitting in the coffers than I would ever want. I'd be puzzled if my workers could actually have that much money left in there, and way more than the corporation or something. I mean, these guys got immense wealth.
Yes, they do.
Yeah,
because they use their office for enrichment. I mean, half the people in Congress, there are 535 members of Congress, half of them are millionaires. So that means 50% of the people in Congress are millionaires.
And this is both Democrats and Republicans.
Democrats and Republicans. You see, either party. It doesn't matter which party. They both are corrupt. 1% of the American people are millionaires. And I keep saying this point over and over again, but it still resonates and I think rings true. And that is, you either have to conclude, since half of them 50% of them are millionaires, only 1% of the American people are millionaires, you'd have to conclude that the members of Congress are 50 times smarter than the average person in the American general population, or they're corrupt. And I can tell you, based upon the way they run the nation's capital and the affairs of the nation, they're not 50 times smarter than the American people. In fact, there's nothing to believe they're even on the same peer level as the intelligence of the American people, because we don't see any intelligence in the nation's capital. What we see here is very much, we see mediocrity in Washington, D.C. But here's the thing that shows you what we're dealing with as far as the sexual, the predatory things we're seeing right now that's coming out of the woodwork. And these allegations against John Conyers is nothing new. You can go back and read a book that came out called Clash of the Races, written by the formerly known Don L. Lee, whose name is Haki Madhubuti, and read his book and read about John Conyers, where they were putting out when the FBI was doing these clandestine operations, because Hoover had all kinds of records on everybody in order to maintain himself in power. He was looking in the bedroom at what everybody was doing, in order to maintain himself in power. And one of the persons that was named in the FBI sting was John Conyers. And they were saying this man has a particular weakness for women in Washington. This is back in the 70s. So now John Conyers is being brought out in the open right now, and he stepped down from his position temporarily as a member of the House Foreign Relations Committee, but he's not going to resign either. The man is drunk with power. And he's the oldest serving member in Congress right now, and one of the most corrupt persons in Congress. Anyway, we got to wrap it up. But don't think you're looking at anything new here, because these persons in the Congress are just as corrupt as any persons are in power anywhere in the world, and they're the same here as they are elsewhere. Okay, we're going to continue to talk about these things here on the air, and want you to stay tuned. Want you to stay tuned to all the programs here at allpointstv.com and also at WFOV Radio 92.1. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.